The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Sandhill's webcast on Modern Data Modeling with SAP PowerDesigner 16.6. My name is Robert Letton, and joining me on the call is Jeff Giles. I'd hope that most folks watching this recording would know that data models are the foundation of every IT system. They are the blueprints for creating and maintaining medium to large databases. In your organization, you may have seen the push to be more agile in the way you manage changes, especially when working with an agile development team. Sandhill consultants will demonstrate how leveraging SAP PowerDesigner 16.6, you will be able to iterate changes through different model types to the database code easily. We will be reviewing why modern data modeling is still relevant in today's world, why iterative modeling is important, and why traceability matters. As an FYI, like we've done in past recordings, we will be recording this webcast, and we will send out the link for this recording once we've uploaded it to our YouTube channel, Sandhill Consultants, where you'll find our other recordings. Finally, if attendees have questions, please use the dialog box to submit your question. We will, at the end of the webcast, regroup and try and answer as many of them as we can. So with that, Jeff, let's start with the introductions to Sandhill Consultants. So Sandhill Consultants are specialists in intelligent data design solutions. Basically, Sandhill Consultants is a group of people, federated products and processes that help our clients build comprehensive data architecture resulting from a persistent data management process via the CMM maturity model, CMM DMM, data maturity model, of which Sandhill Consultants are a certified partner, developing a robust governance practice which produces a datum veritas, which we all hope to reach that goal of trusted, governed data. So Jeff, go to the next slide. I have slides, graphic slides that will talk about this, so I'll just highlight them, but they're just technology and business strategy, enterprise data management framework, metadata management assessments, and data management maturity assessments. So Jeff, go to the next slide and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So usually we talk about our expertise in the PowerDesigner space. We'll certainly mention that, but I also thought it'd be worthwhile to let clients know that we can help organizations if they're struggling to get an understanding of their business and IT strategy. We do a top-down and bottom-up approach in how we align business to IT. So whether you're looking for enterprise operating model or architecture governance, we can obviously help organizations frame that from the IT/business perspective. Next slide, Jeff. We are fans of both DMBOK and the DMBOK 2, which is probably going to come out in about a year's time, and the CMMI DMM maturity model framework. This allows us to obviously build our thoughts and strategies around the data management program, the data governance, data quality, data operations, platform architecture, and supporting processes. And you'll find that we actually go into a lot more detail than just doing the assessments on that side, which brings up the next question of Jeff, go to the next slide. Because we're a fully certified CMMI DMM assessor, we can actually help organizations if they're interested in finding out what level they're at within their own organization from a data management perspective. There's over 27 different areas, and we actually help organizations understand where they're at, where they want to go, and then the prescriptive behavior to get there. And Jeff, go to the next slide. One of the most important things, and Jeff's going to talk about this a little bit today, in an agile environment, it is critical that you use standards, procedure, processes, libraries, models, templates. And one of the things that we actually do through our solutions is offer accelerated programs for modeling solutions. So we'll actually be able to help organizations come up and identify and develop their standards and best practices, procedures, forms, life cycles, guiding documents and reports, so they can use that in the tool set of PowerDesigner to get a jump start from where they're going. Again, if there's more interest in that, you can come up to us on that. So Jeff, go to the next slide. So obviously, we'll be using the SAP PowerDesigner Enterprise Architect Edition. You may not have that edition. You may only have the Data Architect Edition. This slide shows you the differences of the two, and there's also a Sapphire PowerDesigner option, which will allow you to bring in the metadata from SAP, SAP BW, HANA, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, Oracle EBS, Siebel, or Salesforce. So if there's any interest in that, you can certainly contact me. Go to the next slide, Jeff. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we are obviously PowerDesigner experts, and we do training. We have our own training program within PowerDesigner. If there's any interest in that, you can certainly talk to me, and I have my contact details at the end. And with that, 5 minutes introduction. I'll now, Jeff, go to the next slide, which is hand it over to you to begin modern data modeling development with SAP PowerDesigner 16.6.
Thank you, Robert. And with that mouthful of modern model development, I'm going to jump into PowerDesigner. So
it's a tongue twister, Jeff. It's a tongue twister. That was sure, yeah.
My favorite one is more models means more metadata management. Now, there's a lot of M's in that one. What I'm going to do now is actually just jump right into PowerDesigner and talk about PowerDesigner within the context of being agile. So one of the tenets of being agile is to not reinvent the wheel every time, to be able to actually start with sort of a basis, a level, a template sometimes, and actually start to build the models out from there. The other ability is the ability to take the stuff that you're modeling, and when it's ready, to actually push it to the next level or the next phase while you're still working on other things. This would be that iterative concept. So what I hope to do here is actually just talk to you, show you actually how you can employ those ideas and those concepts in PowerDesigner. So let's get started. First thing, in my workspace, I only have this thing here called the library, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. But let's say I want to start from the beginning. I can actually start a model from a template in PowerDesigner. And you can create templates for all kinds of models in PowerDesigner. You know, data movement models, conceptual, logical, physical, enterprise architecture, whatever model type you want. But by starting from a template, you can have a lot of the common things already built out. So if I say OK here at this point, I end up with a new model, which is currently called Customer Accounts number 2. And if you look at this over here on the left-hand side, I've already got a business rule. I've got a set of domains. I even have a couple of some data items here and some entities. Now, yours might not have all of this information, but really what I wanted to do is to show you what you could include in a template. So from this, I can actually say, okay, I need to start building a model. So maybe this is about accounts. So I would grab this account entity thing, and I just drag it in. So now I'd have an account. And then I could say, well, I've also got this idea of a checking account, and I've also got this idea of a savings account. And then I can start to look at saying, okay, well, a checking account is a type of or kind of account. Savings is also a type of or a kind of account. And then I might say, oh, well, I've got customer here. So I can start to bring that in. And then I might say, well, we have a customer that can own one or more accounts. And one or more accounts can be owned by a customer. So essentially what we've got here is a many-to-many relationship. And that many-to-many relationship is really enforcing a particular business rule. So when I look at this business rule concept, I've got this idea called a joint account. So now I can actually say, okay, joint account, this is the rule that says that a bank account in the name of 2 or more individuals can be owned by 2 or more individuals equally. So that actually helps me take a business rule and associate it with a model artifact like this. So again, that makes things go a little bit faster for me. Now when I take a look at this idea of an account, I can say, well, this account needs some attributes. So that I can go here and look at my catalog of data items. It's the same list of data items that are over here on the left-hand side. And I can begin to say, okay, well, we have an account number and we have a balance. And if you look over here, you'll notice that I've got this thing called code. This is the abbreviation. So over here on the left-hand side is the actual business name or business term, and over here would be its abbreviation. And on the data type, in some instances, it's undefined, and in this case, it happens to be associated with an idea called money. So when I click on the OK button here, I can now go in here and see that this idea of an account with a code that actually has some kind of a definition that's also supported by a domain called amount. So I can actually assign domains to data items ahead of time, which speeds things up. So these data items can be as generic as you want. So in this case, I might say, well, this balance idea might be tied to account balance, but I might have other kinds of balances that I might want to use this idea for as well. So there are different kinds of accounts out there. So I've got account balance, I can apply that, and now I can say okay. Let's finish this up by saying our checking also has got this idea of a service fee, monthly service fee for checking, and the idea of savings has also got an interest rate. So we've got some things here. I'll put some stuff in here in customer, same idea. I can just grab from these things and say, well, we have to have a customer identifier, and we can apply that. Notice that I don't have any data type assigned, and there's no domain assigned to this, this item here, so I could say that we'll simply use an integer for this, and we'll do the same thing over here. We'll say that this thing will also have an integer. Now, once I start applying these things, one of the nice things that I can do here in PowerDesigner is I can go to the model menu and say, hey, I want to look at all of my data items, and then I can actually see them. I can see what it's used by, its name, its account, its code, all kinds of details about that. If I look at details about, let's say, account number, then I could say, oh, well, this idea here for an account number, maybe I want to add more details to it or something like that. I can do those kinds of things here just by lists. Now we'll take a look at this thing up here called the library. Now in PowerDesigner, a library is really a set of resources that you can define that you can use for reusable objects. So in this case, I've got something called status model pattern. Now the status model pattern in this case is really just a generic reference to a status. So we've got something as generic as an entity status, a status type, status categories. I can look at this and say, well, I know that account can have a status. That is, it's either active or it's inactive. It can be closed. So I might need this, so I can simply grab this information that I've got here. I can make a copy of it, and then I can go back here and say, okay, I want to tie it in. So now I can actually see that I've got a status type, and then I can start to put that information into this model as well. So this makes it go a whole lot faster as well. The idea of this supertype subtype, let's figure out how we're going to do the generation of that. We can generate just the children. That is, you get separate objects for savings and checking. Or I could say, let's just roll everything up into one parent, which is the account, and then we'll set some specifying attribute to make the difference. So let's call this account type. So we'll have that, and we could say that perhaps this is a varchar of, let's say, 10. So now I've got that information in here, and I'm starting to build out this, this model here. Before I generate a model, one of the things that can save me some time is to actually check the model to see if there's any issues that PowerDesigner might find with this particular model that might be, let's say, cause an issue later on down the road. If I can track down a problem up front, it will actually help me further down. In here, PowerDesigner has data items that don't have a defined data type. So I might say, well, which one is that? So then I can go through here And I could say, oh, my status from date doesn't actually have a data type. I could say, well, I might actually have a domain that applies to that. So I can go ahead and fix anything that might be an issue before I go ahead and generate it down to the physical level. So let's assume that everything is good and I'm ready to generate this thing down to the physical level, assuming I've already gone ahead and run a check model. There's this idea of saving the generation dependencies. And what that means is that I still want traceability for the business level down to the implementation layer. So PowerDesigner will actually create traceability for me as I go ahead and generate this down to a physical database. So in this case, in the lower right-hand corner, you can see this is an Oracle 12c. There's also this artifact here, which is essentially how the many-to-many relationship here is been handled. Now, one of the things that I'm looking at this is that this many-to-many relationship is looking for a primary key and a foreign key, which I didn't have in the other one. So this is the iterative nature of how PowerDesigner works, is that I can now, let me close that up so I don't go to the wrong place, is that I can now go back here to this object, and I can say, okay, I need to go in here, and I need to look at this attribute, and I'll make this a primary object, and over here, and look at account, go to this, and make that the primary object. Now I can just iterate that change down back into the physical data model here in PowerDesigner. So it's asking me, do you want to update this existing physical data model? And I could say, okay, yeah, go ahead and do it. The nice thing about this is that PowerDesigner goes ahead and says, okay, well, what are the deltas between these things? So anything that's a change will show up. So I can look at this here, and down here it will tell me exactly how things will propagate. I can either accept or reject at this point in time a particular change that I want to make. So the idea here is that if I'm in an iterative environment, I don't have to accept all changes at the same time. I could simply say, these two changes I want, but this other one here I'm not going to do until another iterative cycle or iteration cycle. In this case, I want them. So I'm going to push them down. I'll get the relationship here. I can redefine this and call it customer and account and begin to flesh this out. So the changes that happen between the model levels are easily pushed down to the other levels. Now, one of the things that I did that I didn't want to do is I put this in the wrong spot. I'm going to put it over here. I just moved it out of the shared model folder, which it didn't belong in, and put it over here outside that area. Do the same thing here with this one too. So I don't need them there. There. Now they're outside that, and I close up that library. So I have the two models that I'm working with. Now let's assume that this model is, let's say, ready to go and start to go into a development cycle. What we can do in PowerDesigner is we have the ability to do a check-in to the PowerDesigner repository. So I can pick and choose essentially where I want to put this. So I've got a folder here called Work in Progress folder. I can say add some notes about the check-in, any details I want to put it in about this. I can also freeze this and have different versions. So when I check something into the repository here, you'll notice that I've got this Work in Progress folder that has got the information or the thing that I'm working on right now. But let's suppose in the Agile environment here, we actually have different phases. There's a dev, there's a test, and there's a production. Well, what I'd like to do is to use PowerDesigner's branching feature to help me execute that. So within this particular folder, I can right-click and I can create a new branch. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the model that's in there and essentially call that the base branch or the trunk, and I get to define what the branch is. So I'll just call this development and say OK. So what ends up happening here in PowerDesigner is we actually have two models now. but both models are exactly the same at this point in time because there's really no difference between them. But I can go back out here to my local area and start to do some more work on that physical data model. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to put some more details in about, let's say, date time here for a data type. I'll just say date and time. I'll put that in. I might also say, oh, well, I think I'd like a view on accounts. So then I'll create a view, and I'll call this account view. So I've got account view. So I've made a couple of changes here within this particular model. I also may have made some changes up here in this model as well. I may have, let's say, for instance, added a new attribute, attribute 13. I can still go ahead and generate this down to the physical. It'll ask me to update that existing physical. I can take the new column that I've got here and just push it on down. I can still work between these two models. I can take this model now and actually do a check-in. And when I do the check-in, now I can say, okay, it's going to go into the work in progress folder. So there I can say, okay, I'm going to check this in, and yes, go ahead. And then I can actually say, in this case, maybe this status, date, and time is ready to go, but attribute 13 is not ready to go, and we haven't decided whether we're even going to put that in. There's also this thing here called a view, and I'm not sure if I want that in there at this point in time. So I can go ahead and push those in. The other thing is on my, I push those into, let's see, where did it go? I think I pushed those into the main trunk when I meant to push them into the development branch. Hang on one sec while I take this model, close it. Yes, go ahead, save those changes. Yes, go ahead, save those. Okay. Now I can open this model. Yes, go ahead, open the model. See if I can do a check-in to the branch. Well, it's not letting me check it into the branch, but let me show you how the change list works here. When I do a check-in, I can actually check into a governance area in PowerDesigner, which is essentially a change list. Essentially what this does is it holds a model, let's say, in a certain state until it's been reviewed by a governance process or something like that, and then I can move it into a main model or move it into another branch. I can add whatever details I need during the check-in process. But once I've checked something into the governance process or the change list, it now exists in here, and it's got a little pencil icon. The pencil icon means I can still change it. I can still do iterations into it while it's in the change list, either myself or other people on the team. But once I go ahead and click a submit, what happens is this moves into the next phase, which is a locked model. So it looks like a little icon with a gear on it. And what that means is that it cannot be edited. It is actually locked until it's approved. And the way that PowerDesigner works is that when something goes into the submission queue, an email is actually sent out to anybody who might be on the list of approvers. And it says, somebody has submitted a change into PowerDesigner and it says you can approve it, reject it, or return it for revision. And this would go out to anybody that's on the governance team. So they'd be automatically alerted that there's a change that happened that you have to take some action on. So assuming that I am part of the approvers team, I can go in here and I can say, yes, I approve this. Once I choose to approve this, what happens is it's now actually put in the original place where it's supposed to go. See, this is now V2. It's now put into the folder, and it's now removed from the change list. So the idea here is that I can actually have some governance around my workflow. So if I'm working on an Agile team, we can evaluate a model before moving it to another branch or moving it to another location. So that, in effect, is essentially how you can use PowerDesigner to be a little bit more effective, that is in creating models, generating change between models, using the repository to create branches and check things into branches and check them out of branches, and use the change list to help you with the governance process so that only the changes you want to go through actually go through. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Robert to talk some more.
Thanks, Jeff. One question I did have, and by the way, if anyone's got any questions, they can put it into the box there. So sometimes our webcasts are an hour long, 45 minutes long, and this here one is obviously just a short technical update how to work with a modern data modeling with SAP PowerDesigner. One question I did have, Jeff, that might be worthwhile just for our audience to know is how automated can you get with PowerDesigner and these features, and what's the best option to do that?
Just about anything in PowerDesigner can be scripted. You can create your own custom menus, you can create your own custom commands, and you can automate just about anything that that I talked about. You can automate the generation process from one model to another. You can automate the process by which everything goes into perhaps a change list. You saw the automation on the email that went out to the recipients. So PowerDesigner's automation functionality has two parts to it. It's got its own API, which is a COM API, which is a kind of a Windows communication concept, which means that PowerDesigner can talk to any other COM compliant application. So that would include the Microsoft Office suite of tools, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. In addition, other COM compliant applications can actually talk to PowerDesigner. So that means Excel can talk to PowerDesigner. One of the things that I didn't show that I should probably show is that under the Tools menu here, there's something called Execute Commands, and you can customize a set of commands. There are some things out here. There's one here called Create Views, and essentially it's using VB script, so you can dimension your variables and set the if-then-else's and message boxes and all kinds of stuff here. And this particular routine would go ahead and create a view for every table that happens to be in a physical model. So if I executed that, then what would happen is it would go ahead and create a view for everything. So close that. Oh, I clicked it twice. So I got twice it shows up. So these things can be customized, automated. You can do just about anything you want with them in PowerDesigner. As this quick example shows, that if I need a view for every table, I can create that. I can even use the Tools menu here to create my own commands. So I could put a command on a menu item and actually execute it. Customize commands here, you name the command, you decide what the menu structure should be. Context is basically tells you, is this a logical, a physical, business process? What kind of model am I actually looking at here? You've got VB script, and you can actually create an exe that works with this, where one would find the script, any comments such as documentation on this, and if there were a hotkey, you could go ahead and define a hotkey for that command and execute it that way. So the idea here is that PowerDesigner is pretty flexible, and you can do just about anything you want with it. The model types are all documented within the help section. So here is something called Meta Model Objects Help. And within the Meta Model Objects Help, you've got all the PowerDesigner libraries. So if I wanted to know what I could do on a physical data model, I could expand it. And if I wanted to know what can I do with a view, you could just go down, find the object in question, such as a view, and you could say, okay, here's the inheritance structure for a view, and I could also see exactly what you can do. The methods, collections, what properties are there, and details about things that you can actually do with this meta class base. That's one of the nice things that you can do from a customization standpoint. And since we have a little time, I'll take you through a quick exercise here where I might want to say, let's say on our account, maybe there's a security level on this thing called account. Now, if I look across here, I have a whole bunch of tabs that will give me different things, but I'd like a tab that actually tells me what's the security level of this particular object. So in PowerDesigner, there's this thing called an extended attribute or a new attribute. And here I can define it. I could say that this is a security level. And then I could say, well, what is a security? Is it a text, string? Is it a path? Is it a date? Is it a color? I have some options here. So let's just say it's a string. And then we could say, well, maybe there's a list of values for security level. So I could say that it's high, that is, it's of high security value. I could say it's medium. I could also say that it's low. So I have my three options here. I could even put a default value that says, well, if nobody selects anything, then it's going to be high or low, but that could be dangerous. So we'll just leave the default value with nothing. And of course, I might want to comment my work so that anybody else that comes in here and looks at this thing knows exactly what it's for. But then as I go through here, I could say, well, I actually want to create my own new tab for this. And I'm going to call this security level detail, let's say. So I've got that. And so now I can click Finish. So when I look at this thing, I think I might have to just refresh it. Go in here, and I could see at the top here, I've got a new tab called Security Level Detail. And I've got this thing called Security Level. And I can actually pick high, medium, and low and apply that to an object here. So now I can say that this has a security level. And since I've extended the metadata that PowerDesigner is actually tracking, if I wanted to, I could actually go in and say, let me look at all the tables. And one of the things I want to filter on for a table would be the security level. So I should be able to find in here somewhere my security that I created. There it is, security level. And say, okay. So now when I look at this, I can see that that is security level medium. And I could go in here and start to apply those to other things as well. So I could see that I could have one for the entity status or status type, customer, etc. So all of those things can be customized in here. Other things that can be customized in here are things about, let's say, stereotypes. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to differentiate account from customer. That says that account is one kind of a table, but customer might be another kind of a table. Once you've started creating these extensions, there's actually an extensions file that's built. And these are my local extensions. And if I look at my profile, there's my table, there's the form I created, and these are the extended attributes for the security level. But now I can actually say that for this object, I'd like to create a new, let's say, stereotype. And I would say that this stereotype might reference a table as being a staging table. So I could say, oh, okay, this is a staging table. Now I might want to differentiate a staging table by saying this one will actually have a custom symbol that's associated with it. So I will modify this to say that the fill color for all my staging tables is going to be this lovely purple color. And so now I've customized that, and I've applied that, and now I can go in here, and I can look at this thing here called stereotype and see that staging is now an option. And when I choose OK, it's now this wonderful purple color. So lots of different things that you can do with PowerDesigner. It's a fairly flexible tool, and you can customize it just about any way you want. So that's a really long answer to a short question.
And a little bit more than what people bargain for. We've had some questions while you've been showing that. I wondered if I can just have you maybe answer them or at least give a direction. First one is, does SAP PowerDesigner interface with other source control tools like CVS to store workflows?
It doesn't do it directly out of the box. However, as I mentioned, PowerDesigner has a COM API, and if the source control product that you are interested in understands COM, you could probably script something that will go against it. All PowerDesigner models are basically under the covers just XML. So they're XML files, so they can be checked into and out of version control products pretty easily.
So that was from Sanjit, who also had another question. Does the tool provide the translation of a logical data model to a physical data model only for relational databases? Are NoSQL databases supported by the tool?
At this point in time, PowerDesigner does not have a reference to a NoSQL model type. But that's mostly because nobody's really quite figured out what a NoSQL model type should look like. And of course, NoSQL, there's different types. You know, you've got your file-based Mongo and Couch, and then you've got your Cassandras, and then you've got your Neo4j, which is a graph type. Each one of those requires a different kind of structure for a model. But what I can tell you from this is that I do have the ability to go and generate from this physical an XML model type. I can also generate an object-oriented class model type from this. So I do have some options on generating those kinds of things, but at this point in time, I don't have one that goes against directly against the NoSQL SQL types.
Thank you, Jeff. And but that is something that we believe that SAP is looking at.
I know, right? They've told me they're researching that and are looking for just the right solution for that.
Great. I have another couple of questions that have come in while we've been chatting. So this one's from Bernard, right?
Okay.
What will be the scenario to import a model for SQL reverse engineering, but my description of attribute or table are in another software? They want to have everything in one solution. So
one solution. Oh, okay. So let's say this. Let's say, for instance, one of the mechanisms that you can use for getting metadata into PowerDesigner is obviously reverse engineering the database, which you can go against a live database or a DDL file. Another mechanism that you can use for getting information into PowerDesigner is a Excel file. So in PowerDesigner, under the file menu here, there's an import. An Excel file is one of the options. So you would pick what kind of type of model you're working with. So this could be business process model. This could be all kinds of different models that you could work with. But in this case, let's say I happen to have one, I think, over here, which is my models. And I've got some sample code, I believe, that will be a lot like an Excel import. So a table column definition report. So all I have to do is point to the Excel file. I will create the symbol so you can actually see it when it's done. And from that, it's essentially saying, look, I'm looking at your Excel file. There's a tab at the bottom of Excel called Table. I'm assuming that you want to create tables from this. I could change this to other things, but assuming that's what I want, I could do that. Now, table name, that was in the Excel spreadsheet. PowerDesigner doesn't know how to map it to its meta model. So in that case, I have to tell it that that would map to a name, and that table abbreviation would map to a code, and that a definition would probably map to something called a description. So what this is basically saying is that even if your Excel file doesn't match, the columns don't match exactly with what PowerDesigner is looking for, you can manually map them. However, if you do have a map, that is, they match, PowerDesigner will accurately say, okay, a name is a name, a code is a code, and a comment is a comment. So when it's done, PowerDesigner will go ahead and say, okay, you just imported from an Excel spreadsheet 2 tables, and then when I look at it, name, which is what this is, code, which was what they were calling abbreviation, and I believe in my definition here, I would get my description, such as contract to purchase goods. So those are the 2 ways that I know of that you can get stuff from other applications into PowerDesigner, either reverse engineer it in or use Excel spreadsheet to get it in. There are third-party companies like Meta Integration and Toolbus from Reichman Informatic that do write custom bridges between, let's say, Irwin in PowerDesigner, your Studio in PowerDesigner, even other UML tools as well, and bring those things into PowerDesigner as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Got another couple.
Yep.
The next one is from Navid. By the way, Bernard says thanks. But Navid says, can you show us BO universe creation, a new feature, he thinks?
Okay. Business objects universe creation. Because PowerDesigner is a SAP tool, within the actually, I would have to turn something in. Well, let's try this and see what happens. I'll take this and turn it into multi-dimensional objects. So I'll generate a cube. I don't know what PowerDesigner is going to say about this cube. I'll just say that that's what we got. Let's say customer is a cube. And I've got this. I'll bring them both in then. Well, this is what happens when you try to do things on the fly. Sometimes they don't always quite work, but let me do this. It's pretty quick. If I do just a quick reverse engineer, I think this one will work out pretty well. And say that this one happens to be SQL Server 2008. I'll use this script file to actually bring something into PowerDesigner. Should reverse engineer this database. Okay. All right, now I've got something I can actually work with because I've got some relationships. Now I can actually go in here and say, let's generate, well, actually I can tell it to retrieve multidimensional objects. Now here it's just going to make its best guess on the PKFK tables, and it's going to say, oh, well, these things should be fact tables, and these things should be dimension tables. Sometimes it works, sometimes it misses the mark, but once I've got some of that stuff done, I can go in here and say, all right, let's build some cubes from this, and hopefully I can drive it through here and finish this out. Tools. Rebuild objects. All right. And it's going to use that one. And that's the one I want. Is it asking me to do anything else?
So it says select the fact table column as measures or attributes of your fact. By default, PowerDesigner selects non-numeric keys.
I think what it's done is it says, look, I can't build this from this. This is not a good table to be a fact table.
But that's how you do it anyway. You go through those.
Yep, you go through the wizard, and then you build it, and then once you build it, then you can actually go to SAP Business Suite and, business objects, and then generate business objects universe from those cubes that you built. You can also do the inverse. If the cubes exist in business objects, you can bring them into PowerDesigner, and they will be represented as cubes that way. You do have to have Business Objects Designer installed on your machine. If you don't have it installed, then you won't be able to do this, which is, I don't have that, so I can't go through this whole entire process, but that's how it would work.
Cool. Laura had asked a question, can BPMN model be exported to Rational Business Process Modeler? Is that possible? And it's BPMN.
Let's see, Rational Business Process Modeler. Not without a bridge. I think you would need a bridge. I mean, obviously, PowerDesigner can create the business process model that you're describing. It supports BPMN, both descriptive and executable. Now, one of the export options for PowerDesigner is something called, what is that export option? I think it's called serialized export. So, it's called BPMN serialization. That's one of the export mechanisms for PowerDesigner that you can actually do. You can actually do that kind of export. So you can export to a standard BPMN model, that's what the serialization export is. And of course, specifically to Solution Manager, that uses the SAP BPM, which has other extensions included in it. So what I would probably do is try the standard export and see if your tool will import BPMN serialized export.
And Jeff, you mentioned there may be some other export tools out there export tools that have bridges. Is Reichman, would Reichman be one of those bridges? Yeah,
they do Toolbus, and I think you can find them on the web if you Google Toolbus. That's Toolbus. And Reichman does models other than just data models. They'll do UML models and things like that. So they'll bring other kinds of things across: process models, data models, UML models. The other company is called Meta Integration, and Meta Integration mostly covers, I believe, data models and data modeling. So they do a pretty good job with, Irwin to PowerDesigner, or ER Studio to PowerDesigner. They'll do IBM's Data Architect to PowerDesigner. So that they do those kinds of things.
So, and Laura, we're partners with the Reichman company out in Europe. So if you need any information on the toolbox, Toolbus solution, just let us know. I had another question from Navid. Can you show us replication feature and how it works with impact analysis using repository?
Replication, okay. So there's a couple of different kinds of replications, and I'm not exactly sure which kind of replication you're talking about. So let me just say that there's replication of data elements that will work between data models. There's actually something called a replication model type, which is really part of the data movement model. So data movement can actually have a replication model by which we are replicating data from one system to another system. That's also called replication. I'm not sure which one you're interested in. Is it replication on data models, between data models?
Well, we'll let Naveed come back to us on that because we've got another question from Bernard, right?
Okay.
Bernard says, Naveed did respond back. It's replication of object.
Oh, replication of object. So in case here of table 10, I can look at my columns, and I've got this thing here called replicate columns. What this basically does is make an inheritance idea, or a duplicate or a clone of the object, which means that if I were to take street and actually use it here and apply that change, what you'd notice is that if I found a street and I made a change to it by going into this, see how this is all grayed out? I actually have to find the parent that actually is street and make modifications to the parent. Notice the data type can't be changed. I can't add a comment. It's essentially saying that you actually have to find the parent, and the parent is where you would need to make that change. So let me see if I can find the parent for street here, wherever I put it. Street here is probably this guy. Column, street. And I'll just put some stuff in here and apply that. And if I got the right one, then we should see that. Oh, I got the wrong one. Essentially, you can see that street actually happens here, and street happens here. And I think it also happens in contact as well. So it's actually 3 subjects here. The one that I selected here, I'm not sure which one it is, but let me see. Not to take up too much time, just to prove the point as to how this thing actually works, is it really just makes a clone. All right, I got the right one. So you see here that this comment, any changes to the data type, any changes to anything here is essentially going to be replicated. So what this allows you to do is to say, hey, look, I got street here. I got street here. And I got street over here. Are these all the same street, or are these different kinds of streets? I could actually say, well, they're really just the same thing. And what I'd like to do is just replicate that around this model. And then if I change street in one location, it will change it in all these other locations. It's kind of like a super domain in that a domain will change things like your data type. But in addition to that, it will actually change the comments or any characteristic about that object that you want to change. So
Thanks, Jeff.
hopefully that explains it.
Yeah, and we'll take this one last question. It's back from Bernard, who says about the branch in the repository. Did you say that it used to represent the test, production, prod, and how you manage the versions of the model in Visual Studio in the development team versus the versioning in the repository? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so essentially this is the way that it works. It didn't work out quite so well the way that I was working it. Essentially what it is that I can check into the development branch. And at any point in time, I can actually integrate, which is this thing, into the main branch. So assuming that I'm going on, let's say, a parallel development track, that is, I'm doing development, but we're also doing, let's say, work in production, God forbid, but let's assume that's happening. I can actually integrate my current branch, development, with the target branch, which is default, which means that if there's any deltas between these two things, I can essentially pick and choose what I want to bring over. So since they're exactly the same, there's really nothing to integrate. But it says changes in development can be iteratively integrated, there you go, iteratively integrated into the main branch, and I can pick and choose exactly what artifacts I want from my development branch to go into my production or test, or you can have as many branch levels as you want. I mean, I've had people actually have Jeff, Mike, and Sue as branches. Each one is working their own branch, and then they selectively integrate into the trunk when they decide that that's what they want to do. So that's essentially how the branching structure works within PowerDesigner. It's really used to help you with a model working through a series of phases before it actually gets released.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Do you want to just put that last slide up, and we'll just go to close. And again, thank you for handling that. You can just put that call to action number 12 up. So if people are interested in buying more licenses of PowerDesigner, we can help you. If you're interested in having Jeff or one of our educators come on site and help you with PowerDesigner education, we can help you there. Same goes for data warehouse services or our enterprise modeling set of standards and best practices for PowerDesigner. So I've got my contact details there. We will record and finish up this recording, post it up in the next day or so. And with that, I'd like to thank Jeff for your time today. We will be looking at some more webcasts such as business process to data, data movement, enterprise architecture, data model patterns, and the Zachman framework, to mention a few, that we'll be working on over the summer, back with a fall schedule. So if you get any other thoughts that you want to see as a WebEx, we'd be more than happy to entertain that. Send a note to me, and thank you indeed for your time. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.